I didn't have a social life until I was 22 years old. And I've honestly never told anybody this except for very close family because it's deeply personal, but I could never make friends until I was literally 22 years old. Like all through school, all through high school, through most of college, I never hung out with anybody because I was scared. And I thought it was shyness growing up, but it turned out to actually be severe social anxiety. It could have destroyed the rest of my life if I didn't get a grip on it, but it took until I was 22 to start doing that. And since then, I've turned my life around, but I'm making this video because I want to show people what my experience was in hopes that it will prevent people from going through the same thing and making the same mistakes that I did. So I'm gonna start this from the very beginning. I grew up in the South on the countryside. I would say our family they didn't talk to a lot of people. I had a brother and a sister that I talked to a lot, and then I had some cousins that we would see, but that was pretty much it. We didn't really go to church. I think I was coming into school with not a lot of social exposure, and I was very shy and very quiet. When I first started preschool, apparently the teacher said that I used to, instead of playing with the other kids, I would just sit on the wall by myself and I wouldn't talk to anybody. And looking back, I kind of remember this, and I would look at the other kids on the playground and I would only go play if they were gone. And it was because I would see all the other kids being loud and rowdy, and I was honestly scared to go over there because I guess loud people, it was scary to me. So I didn't talk to any of the other kids, and I think the teacher was starting to worry about me at that point. So when I started kindergarten, I still struggled to talk to people and was scared. But I think I made a few friends in classes, but I didn't hang out with anybody. My parents put me in sports because I was very athletic and they wanted to see if that would help. I think it helped a little bit, but honestly, I still didn't make any friends with my teammates. And I was very afraid of authority. When teachers would get mad at me, I would just panic. And if I was struggling with something in school, I would be very afraid to ask for help. So I would basically just build all of this up inside, and I think I would cry in front of the teacher sometimes because it would be all pent up and I wouldn't know how to let it out. But as I got older, I did have one friend in junior high, a very close friend, and we would hang out a lot, and that was very good for me, but I didn't hang out with anybody else. And unfortunately, that one kid, he moved away when I started high school, so I couldn't hang out with him anymore. And when high school started, that's when my social anxiety was starting to become very obvious. It was very obvious that I was different from the other kids. So in high school, my closest friend was gone and I really didn't have any other close friends. So I was starting from scratch and I didn't know how to make friends with people. I didn't know how to just go up to random people and talk to them because I was always the really quiet kid. I was the one kid that people would always ask, why aren't you saying anything? How come you're being so quiet? That first year was very difficult for me because I didn't make any friends basically. Everyone that I would try to talk to or would try to get to know me, I didn't mesh well with them. I didn't like them very much and they never invite me to do anything. During lunchtime, this was especially difficult because a lot of people can relate to this, but going to lunch and not having anybody to sit with, it's very awkward, and I would end up sitting with people that I kind of know, but I don't really know well. And I would just sit on the side and nobody would really talk to me. I would just try to listen. And after everyone's done eating, they would all leave and then I'm left by myself. And I know nobody likes that. It's very embarrassing to have to sit there and eat lunch by yourself because you feel like everybody else is looking at you. But it gets worse because after lunch, you go to a 30-minute break, and after 30 minutes, you go to class. But during those 30 minutes, everybody is in this concourse and they socialize. Well, I didn't know anybody, and I would walk up to some friend circles and just try to sit on the outside and listen in, but people would never really let me into their circles. They would never really talk to me, and if they did, it was always just why are you just standing there awkwardly? Why are you not saying anything? They weren't being very nice or open they weren't trying to really get me to talk. So that was awkward, and I ended up just spending the breaks in the bathroom stall every single day because I didn't want to stand there and be awkward and have to deal with people, I guess, making fun of me. So my entire first year, I stayed in the bathroom. The next year, I started making more friends because I started taking honors classes. In these classes, I met other honors students, and they were a lot nicer to me, and I actually made friends with them. The only issue is I never got invited to anything. Basically, I never got invited the entirety of high school. And I desperately wanted to hang out with these people because the people I was friends with, they were really good people, but I was too afraid to actually ask them to do something with me. That thought never even crossed my mind. And my mom, she was noticing that I wasn't socializing with people, and so she would always tell me, you should have some friends over for your birthday party. I would always say no because the thought of having people over to my house and me having to entertain everybody, I felt like I couldn't do that. I had so much social anxiety, and that was just not even an option in my head. My brother and sister, they were very social, and they had healthy social lives. They had a lot of church friends and some friends in school, and they would always go to church. But for me, I would go with them to church to try to get social time, but I would be very anxious in church because they would always ask me about my religious beliefs. Everybody would sing in front of people, and that was very awkward to me. And in a way, I guess I didn't like my brother and sister very much. I had this resentment towards people because I would see other people who were succeeding socially, they had a good social life, and I was frustrated that I couldn't have that. So I started building this very unhealthy resentment towards people that were close to me, and it sucked. It basically made me not want to get help from them because I don't know why. I would see them doing better than me, and I didn't want their help for some reason. That really screwed me looking back at this. But as I started making friends, I noticed I had a very hard time keeping up with social banter. When people will joke around with you, make fun of you, but in a friend way, I would have a very hard time reciprocating and responding because my mind would just be overthinking everything that I'm about to say. And whatever would come out would be just this filtered, awkward garbage, and it just makes people uncomfortable. And the more I would overthink about it, the more I would get in my head. It would become this negative feedback loop that I can't get out of. And I felt trapped. I was so afraid of graduating because I hadn't been building these social skills like all my other classmates. I was too afraid to get my driver's license for a while. I was way too afraid to apply to college and think about college. While all of my other classmates, they were doing all of these things. They were getting ready for college. They were getting scholarship money. They had thriving friend circles, and they were building all these experiences that they were going to have for the rest of their life. And here I am. I feel like I'm just slowly sliding by, and once I graduate, I'm going to be out on the streets, and my time to develop social skills and make relationships is going to be over. And that's how I thought about it. I was terrified of telling my friends or family about this, so I never said anything because not being able to make friends and you're in 9th, 10th, 12th grade and you're just getting older, it becomes harder and harder because it's such a basic thing that most people can do. It should come naturally, but it wasn't for me. And the longer I waited to tell someone about it, the more and more hard it got. I will say this one time, I got invited to a friend's house for a school project when I was a junior. And that was the first time I was invited to anyone's house, really. And when I went over there, my heart was just beating out of my chest, and I'm literally shaking. And I'm just trying as hard as I can just to be normal, to make them think that I'm not weird and that I've done this before. Honestly, I was hoping I would get invited to do more stuff after that, but I didn't. I just kind of slid through the cracks. And I could have easily talked to them and asked if I could hang out with them more, but I just didn't. And they would have said yes, but I was too afraid. So now I'm graduating high school and I'm going to a community college because I didn't have any scholarship money. My ACT scores for college, my college entrance exams were too low. And if you know anything about community college, you're not living on campus. You don't have the normal college experience that other people get. And I didn't even know about the dorm life. I didn't know that that's what you're supposed to get in college. And I thought I was doing pretty good starting in college, signing up for classes. I was proud of myself, but then I look on social media and I see all my old classmates, they're out in university, staying in dorms, and they're meeting people, they're having all these cool social experiences, they're buying stuff for their dorms. And I was comparing myself to them, and it made me feel horrible about myself. I felt like I was missing out on something, and I was just regretting my decisions over the past years more and more. Honestly, it would make me so angry. So I just continued as best I could, staying at community college. I was studying, I was doing all my homework, and I would say I spent a lot more time doing homework than most people, and as a result, I didn't have as much time to try to be social and do things with people. I saw that some of my other friends were doing retail jobs, and I thought that would help my social skills. So I started calling places to get interviews, and I interviewed at Dairy Queen, and I got rejected from that one. But I started working at Kroger as a bagger, and I was extremely anxious going to that interview. Like, I was just sweating profusely, and even the interviewer commented about it. She was looking at my armpits, and she's like, "Looks like you were sweating a little bit." And luckily that was at the end, and I had already got the job, but that was so embarrassing. It was good social interaction for me. Like, I was adjusting to it, but I wanted to get better, so I asked to be a cashier. And I did that for about 3 months, and I'm not sure if it even helped, but I felt completely overstimulated all the time, and I think it just made my social anxiety worse, to be honest. And I ended up getting put in the meat department at the store, and that was a lot better because it was a mix of stocking shelves and talking to customers. So I did that for about 1.5 years. I was lucky and was able to qualify for this NASA robotics competition for community college students. And I applied and got accepted and got flown out to Houston, Texas. It was scary, but it was a little bit exciting in a way. I'd never flown before, and I'd never flown by myself, and my parents were incredibly worried, but I flew out there and got to do this robotics competition with other students. So I had a group that I worked with for about a week, and that was very good for me opening up and getting comfortable with people, because these people were very nice, and we would hang out and work all day. I had never gotten that kind of companionship before, and I came in pretty nervous, but by the end of it, I felt very comfortable around these people. And it gave me a taste of what it's like to have true friends and a social life. And I was so happy in that moment. Like, I was literally starting to cry when I was leaving at the airport and I was saying goodbye to everybody. Because when I came home, I'm alone again. And I had this one friend that I would hang out with through a community college, like one friend who I knew from high school, but we both didn't have social lives. So it was just me and him playing video games sometimes. But he was very helpful, and it was a stepping stone for me. Because if I didn't have him, I would probably be in a much worse spot. So I at least had him, and we would play video games. We would go to the movies sometimes. So that probably helped me out a lot more than I realized. Once I graduated community college, I went to a local university in my hometown. So I was still living with my parents and commuting, and I was studying computer engineering. I was hoping to get involved in clubs and things like that on campus to try to get over my social anxiety and meet more people. I joined this one engineering club and got paired with some other students, and we were building these engineering projects. Unfortunately, none of that panned out. Like, I never really made friends in there. I never hung out with any of those people. But on the positive side, it helped me get my first engineering internship. So I was able to do some interviews, and this stuff looked good on a resume, so it got me into a large defense contractor. It's obviously a lot better than working at Kroger. So I was getting out of retail, and I was going to do a desk job. And that was good, but I didn't like the job because I didn't have a lot of work. The work wasn't interesting, and I struggled to talk to people at my job. I was afraid of talking to my manager, to other team members, and I always felt like I was bothering everybody. So I was just very in my head about it. As the years went by in university, I was trying to put myself out there more with some of my old high school friends. I was forcing myself to invite them to a few things. And the very first time I invited them to something, it felt like I was asking a girl out for the first time, honestly. Like, that's how heavy emotionally I felt. Because I sent a text asking a friend to, hey, you want to come to the movies with me? And I was stressing so hard about that because I'd never actually done it before. But looking back, that was actually progress because my nervous system, I'd never done that before and it was really high. But as I started doing it, it started to lower the anxiety a little bit. And I started trying to do that more and more. So some of these high school friends that I had, I started trying to invite them to, say, go on hikes, go to the movies, go play sports, just anything to force myself to at least make the effort and to try to get out of this social anxiety trap that I'm in. I was making progress, but it didn't feel like enough. And I started developing this horrible depression. I was realizing that I was still trapped within this social anxiety and I just could not shake it no matter how much effort I put in and how much I try to put myself out there with people. I just couldn't get over it. I was at my engineering internship and I hated it. I was really beginning to hate it because I felt trapped. I was not given very much work and I was too afraid to talk to people. Therefore, I did not ask for more work. So there would be weeks where I'm just sitting at my desk, not doing anything, and I'm too afraid to ask for more work because I've already been sitting here doing nothing. And if I go to my manager, he's probably going to ask, what have I been working on? And I've been working on nothing. So it was just this vicious cycle. All I could think about is, this is going to be the rest of my life. I'm sitting here, I can't talk to people, I can't make friendships, I can't succeed in my job. I definitely can't date any girls because I can't talk to girls, so I'm never gonna get married. And I'm gonna get fired from my job and I'm gonna be living with my parents and I'm just gonna be royally screwed. And that's when the depression started getting really bad. I would just sit in my office thinking about these things all the time. And it was getting to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. I knew that therapy existed. I knew cognitive behavioral therapy specifically was good for social anxiety, but I had avoided it for all these years because I was too afraid. So I had 1 year before graduating, I was living with my parents and I told myself I have to do something about this because if I don't, I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life. It took everything I had, but I was able to open up to my mom about it. I just said, look, I need to go to a therapist. And she said, why? And I said, well, I have very bad social anxiety. And she didn't really know about this. Like, she knew I was quiet and I didn't talk to a lot of people. She probably thought I was more antisocial and didn't realize how much anxiety I was going through. This isn't entirely her fault because she's extremely extroverted, so she never struggled with this growing up, so it was not on her radar. My parents both didn't struggle socially, so they were only focused on making sure that I could academically get through high school and that my grades were good, and they didn't really look at my social life as much. So I went to this talk therapy session and I sat down and she said, tell me, like, what's bothering you? I start talking for about 10 seconds and I break down in front of her. I just burst into tears and I can't speak. And whenever I go into tears, I have the very shaky, talky tears. Like, I can't talk when I'm crying. It honestly felt so good at the end of it, just to get all of these things out and have somebody who would listen and didn't just completely reject me at the end of it. And I left feeling so much better about myself. I felt like I had reached the very worst point of my life with social anxiety, and from there, that's when my life started to really steadily improve. I started getting more comfortable about sharing my emotions, and I started opening up to my parents and my brother and sister about this, as well as one of my close friends. And honestly, just doing this, it took all the pressure off of me and made it a lot easier to talk to people. Like, my social anxiety didn't feel as heavy because I'm starting to express some of the emotion, and it doesn't feel so much as this thing that I'm so afraid of telling people, this one thing in my life that I am so embarrassed about. So during my therapy, I started learning CBT techniques, which is behavioral cognitive therapy. It's basically you're rewiring your brain. And the way it works is you will think of things that make you afraid, that give you fear. I would say asking a friend to hang out. And then you say, what are you afraid of happening? And I would say, well, I'm afraid that the person's going to say no. And how will that make you feel? Well, my brain wasn't even thinking about that. It would just automatically short circuit and say that, nope, you can't do that. Nope, that's bad. That's too scary. Don't even think about it. And my brain would not even acknowledge that thought. But with CBT, you work through it. So what exactly am I so afraid of happening? Well, what I'm afraid of happening is the person is going to say no and I'll feel embarrassed and rejected. Well, is that feeling okay? Yeah. It's not the end of the world. Like, I'm going to move on from that. When I started to acknowledge all these things that I was afraid of, and instead of just letting my brain short circuit to some result, I would stop on it and say, hold on, let's actually step through this and see what you're so afraid of. And I started trying to apply this to everything that I was afraid of in my life. It would be like talking to a new person. Okay, I'm afraid they're going to say no. Okay, and what happens if they say no? Like, how are you going to feel? Well, I'm not going to feel good. I'm going to feel embarrassed, but I'm going to live through it. Same thing with like talking to a girl. Well, I'm afraid she's going to reject me and I'm going to be embarrassed. Okay, and how is that going to make me feel? Well, I'm not going to feel good, but I guess I can live through it. I just started retraining my brain to not go to the worst case scenario for all these things that I'm trying to do. So I started pushing myself a lot more socially and was going to restaurants by myself. I was trying to invite friends to do things with me about every other week. And I was taking every social opportunity that I could. That was working for me. I was making a lot of progress, but I couldn't shake the depression that I had. I had this depression the entire time and this anxiety, and it was just debilitating sometimes. It felt like it was slowing me down from getting to the level socially that I knew I could be. Like, I deeply wanted to have a big friend group. I wanted to be the one who was inviting people to do things. I wanted to be hosting parties and doing all these things, but I was too afraid to do it. I was doing everything right too. I was exercising, I was eating healthy, I was getting good sleep. Like, I had a healthy schedule and I was doing the things that are supposed to lower your anxiety, or things that the doctor would normally tell you to do first before they try to prescribe you medication. I was sent to a psychiatrist and they recommended me to take this anti-anxiety, antidepressant medication called Zoloft. I started on 50 milligrams, taking that daily, and that was huge for me. I don't want to say medication fixed all my issues, but it definitely allowed me to do all the things that I needed to do to help my social anxiety. So it exponentially increased my recovery process. So I was starting to invite people to do things with me, and I realized that I wanted to move out of my parents' house this last year of college. I have all this social momentum and I want to keep it. I've always wanted to live on campus and have roommates, and this is my last chance, and I'm going to regret it so much if I don't. So I'm going to do it because I know it's going to help me socially. I was able to get a rental house near campus, and I had one best friend move in with me, and then I got another roommate. And my last year of college was amazing. I had the most fun, and it was because I started integrating myself into this one group on campus. I had this one friend that invited me to this religious group called RUF. I start going to the weekly events, and it's on campus, and it's these worship sessions. The really nice thing about this is you go in there and like you're singing, and at the end, everybody socializes. The people in these groups, they were extremely kind people. Everybody was coming up to me and wanting to get to know me, and I'd never really experienced that before. I ended up going to all of the social events that they offered, and my progress with social anxiety was improving rapidly. I gained so much confidence that My job that I was currently at, the one that I didn't like, I decided to go to the career fair and I wanted a different job. So I talked to some of the recruiters and I was able to get 4 interviews. And guess what? 3 out of 4 interviews, I got the job offer. And it was because I was going into the interviews with this confidence of, even if I don't get this, I know I'm gonna be okay. And I ended up accepting a job and I liked it so much more than where I was at. And once I graduated, I wanted to keep hanging out with people. I wanted to keep building those social skills. So I started inviting people to my house. And I remember the very first time I invited friends to my house, I was extremely nervous. It was for a pumpkin carving, but doing something where there was like some kind of activity where people were focused on doing the activity instead of on you, that made it a lot more manageable for me. And then I started hosting fire pits and grill outs at my house, and I would just invite everybody that I knew. People that I knew at work, friends from school, and I didn't care who didn't want to come, but the people that did show up, I really enjoyed just bringing all these friend groups together and introducing them to each other. That was very fun for me, like expanding people's friend groups. And that was something that I always wished I had growing up, was somebody who would invite me to do things, and I wanted to be that person because nobody else was for me. It was extremely fulfilling and extremely rewarding for me. I became the one that was finding the shy people at my work, at my school, and trying to get them introduced to more of my friends so that I could help them out. The next 5 years after graduating, I was having more parties at my house, and I even started dating. So I didn't start dating until I was 23 years old. I started online dating. I got an online dating profile set up, and I got my first date after about a year. And I was extremely nervous. I completely overinvested before going on the date. I was thinking, oh, we're gonna get married. Oh, it's gonna be amazing. We're gonna have kids. Like, I was thinking all this stuff before I had even met this girl. I show up, I'm incredibly nervous, but the date doesn't go well. I don't like her at all. And then I leave. And I was like, that wasn't terrible. I could probably do that again. So I started going on more dates, and eventually I got a girlfriend. It was crazy how fast all of this was happening. And it was because I was just putting in the very first steps. When you actually make that very first step, whether that's talking to a girl and asking her out for the first time, or inviting a friend to do something, like the very first time you do it, it's the scariest. But once you do that, you realize it's not that bad, and your nervous level, which is always been up here, it starts to drop a little bit each time you do it. And eventually you get to a point where it doesn't even faze you anymore. You invite somebody to do something and they say no, you're like, I don't care, I'll just invite somebody else, but I appreciate it. You ask a girl out to do something, and if she says no, no worries, I'll just ask somebody else. And you just can brush it off pretty easily. So I started doing social dancing. I started going to bars and trying to talk to girls and get better at it. That was obviously after me and my girlfriend broke up. But that year, I was 25 years old and I got into solo traveling. And I ended up going on a trip to San Diego, California. And then I went on a solo trip to Hawaii by myself. It was all because I just kept pushing myself out of my comfort zone. Like, these things that seemed so hard at one point were getting easier and easier, and I was finding out that there's more and more levels to it. But the hardest part was simply starting, and I was so afraid of starting, but when you actually start on something, that's the hardest part. Once you get over that, it starts to get easier and easier. So I did solo traveling, and I ended up moving to San Diego, California when I was 27, and I had the time of my life over there. I was living with fun roommates, I was chasing girls, I was surfing all the time, I had an amazing social life. And then I eventually quit my job because I wanted to try entrepreneurship. So I ended up doing door-to-door sales. I did that for 4 months. Like, can you believe somebody who had severe social anxiety that could barely talk to anybody is now doing door-to-door sales and talking to homeowners, getting yelled at, getting rejected all the time? Well, I was doing that, and it was probably because I had built all this grit from growing up and not having friends and having to force myself into uncomfortable situations and to grow as much as possible. So I eventually left that because I realized that it's not what I wanted to do long term. And I went back to San Diego, moved out of my apartment, and now I'm back here at my parents' house where I'm doing content creation. I've been doing this for almost 90 days. I really enjoy talking about social anxiety and social confidence because I used to be one of those people that struggled with it. So I want to teach people who are where I used to be. So that's my story, everyone. I don't know if you have severe social anxiety, if you have friends but you want to meet more people, or you're socially confident and you are just curious to hear about my life and what I'm doing with it, then please follow along or subscribe because I post weekly. I will talk to you in the next video.